say how pleased we are that you could make it up this afternoon to Ames to see this special presentation. We've invited Shelley Rowe. Shelley is the former ITS director for the US DOT, and she also now runs her own consulting company. I had the privilege of seeing Shelley give a presentation when I was at the National Operations Academy last November, and she gave an excellent presentation there about connected and autonomous vehicles, which led to discussions about our long-range transportation plan at the department. And as we're looking at the future of transportation in our state, how might we need to plan ahead for the technologies that are coming? So this morning, Shelley gave a brief presentation to the LRTP steering committee, and we thought it'd be a great opportunity to share more broadly with a wider audience throughout our DOT about just this concept of technology. So without further ado, I'll introduce Shelley. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Scott. So it was 2012, and I had been in Paris for a few hours. I was there for a PART meeting, and some of you may know PART. It's an international road organization. I was there representing the US DOT. But I just happened to have a free afternoon before the meeting started. So I decided in part to keep myself awake and not fall asleep for the jet lag, but I also thought, well, I'll just go in and see some of the sights in downtown Paris, right? So I've decided I would get on the subway to go into the city. And as I was boarding the subway, just in front of me was an American family with a little boy, probably 8 or 9 years old, little skinny kid, brown curly hair and big horn-rimmed glasses. And they boarded the train right in front of me. So we struck up a conversation. And in the course of the conversation with the parents, I happened to ask them, I said, well, how long have you all been in Paris? And to my surprise, it was the little boy who spoke up. And he said, we've been here for 5 days. I said, oh, really? Well, if you've been here for 5 days, what's your favorite thing so far? Going to the top of the Eiffel Tower. I said, wow, really? Were you scared? No, he said. It's not scary. You can't go all the way to the tippy top. And there's a terrace, and it's not scary. I said, well, if that's your favorite thing, what's your next favorite thing? My next favorite thing, he said, is what I'm going to do today. Today, we're going to talk about some trends that are impacting transportation. What I hope that you walk away with today are something that's going to be your next favorite thing. Because it's something in these trends, and it's something about how these trends come together that are causing this to be one of the most disruptive, transformative times in transportation that I have ever seen in my career. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share with you some of the trends that I see at a very high level. Part of your job is to personalize them to Iowa. And the other part of your job is to think about how the trends come together. How do you connect the dots? Okay? And then we'll talk a little bit more, and feel free to jump in, ask questions, and have a conversation about this, because that's when it really gets interesting and more relevant for you all. Fair enough? Okay, so let's get started. So this is yes, right? Okay, this is no. Okay, so this is yes. All right, so we're going to talk about some of these trends. Let's start with the changing face of your customer, right? The very people that we serve are changing. Look at some of these numbers. I love this first one. Check this out. More than half of all people who ever turned 80 are still alive today. Think about that. That's actually hard to get your head wrapped around. And then look at the workforce participation rate. It's growing for those in an older subset, although I have to say it doesn't sound so old. Right? And of course, we all understand this. You know, people are living longer, their retirement is not necessarily going as far, has to go farther. So we're seeing people stay in the workforce for longer. So that has an impact on the kinds of people that we're serving and that we're designing transportation systems for. At the same time, we also have the digital natives, right? The millennials. Who are millennials here? Okay, so that's insightful. We don't have a lot of that demographic represented here. 75% of social media, highly diverse segment. And check this out. By 2025, 70% of the world's workforce will be part of the gig economy. These are on-demand workers, right? On-demand workers. We just met with the Iowa, University of Iowa. Did I get that right? No, Iowa State University. Ooh, I'm so sorry. Ooh. Iowa State. So you guys, you know, those people that you're working with, those kids, they're going to have a completely different way of thinking about a job. And we're already seeing that. What does that mean to transportation? Check out these numbers. We're seeing a declining number of people with cars, a much lower interest, again, back to what we were talking about today. You guys said you had some high schoolers who came in? And just share what you told me.
So we asked them about autonomous vehicles, things like that, and maintaining cars so they don't bump into each other if they drive themselves. And they had no appreciation whatsoever to ever have to pay for maintenance of anything, never own a car, or ever have any insurance. But they still want to get to where they need to go.
Right. And so keep that in mind when we talk about another one of the dots that we're going to connect. It's very typical of what we're seeing in some of these demographics. Fewer and fewer cars in a household, fewer cars on the road, sales of car buyers falling 30% in that time period. Look at the other one. 54% are licensed before their 18th birthday. Really? Wow. I shared with the group this morning that across the street from us in Annapolis, we have this lovely family. We've got 3 boys. And the oldest one is just now old enough to drive. And so his dad had to threaten him to take away the computer to force him to go get his hours in to get his driver's license. So that never happened when I was growing up, right? And it actually might be different for some of the places in Iowa too. I grew up in a small community in Texas, and because you all have such a high rural area and a lot of agriculture, you might not be seeing that so much with the agricultural-based kids who learn to drive very early on a farm, right? But this is what the kind of numbers that we see in a national situation. Here's the other thing. This is the National Association of Realtors. When people in that demographic were asked where do they want to live, 60% said they prefer to live in a mixed-use community, an area where you could walk to restaurants and walk to work and walk to your home. They don't want to get in a car and have to drive to their workplace. So their preferences about where they want to live, their thought processes about transportation are taking them in a very different direction than what we are all used to. And we need to recognize that those are the people we're designing for today. And particularly in the long-range transportation plan, that's the demographic. They think very differently than we do. A different dot. Everybody got their phone, right? Anybody here not have a cell phone? Yeah, see, we're all connected. That's old news. What this dot is about the interaction that connectivity enables. Look at some of these numbers. Every minute, 200,000 photos uploaded to Facebook. Those are just photos. Every minute, 350,000 updates sent to Twitter. I love this next one. Amazon, 426 transactions per second on Cyber Monday. Are you aware that YouTube is the second largest search engine? Now that one actually crosses over to the customer that you're designing for. The people we're designing for today are consuming information through video. How are you getting information out about your work, about your programs? How are you making use of a video format in a world where YouTube is the second largest search engine behind Google, right? Obviously, highly interconnected due to phones. 80% of the world's population has a phone. That's amazing, actually. This other one, 1 in 4 purchases, that was this year on Black Friday. 25% of all purchases on Black Friday were from a mobile device. In 2015, for the first time, more than 50% of internet traffic was from a mobile device. The world is all about mobile devices. So as you think about what you do at Iowa DOT, or affiliate with Iowa DOT, you think about your websites, you think about how you're getting information out there. Is it mobile optimized? That's a big deal, to make something that looks nice on a great big screen morph into something that works on a tablet, touch screen, and a phone. And yet that's the way people are consuming information, that mobile connectivity. So I love this series of photographs. As I told the group this morning, I borrowed this. I saw this done and went and found the photographs. So this is in 2005. This is at the Vatican in Italy. And now we're going to fast forward to Pope Francis in 2013. That's 8 years. 8 years. Who's here from a district? Okay. So think about the life cycle of your projects from the time you go into design, to construction, to completion, into operation, and what happened, how long 8 years is in our world. That's how long 8 years is in a different world. We live in a world where you have to assume that everyone can photograph or comment on everything you do. Really important, particularly in the districts where you've got people out on a construction site, right? You have maintenance crews that are out there. Every single person that drives by in that car has a camera. Look at these other numbers. 62% of people use social media to report service issues, and 30% expect a response in an hour. See, it's no longer enough to be connected. They want to interact. Now, there was an article in the Washington Post last year, and if any of you, who's been in Washington, D.C.? Okay, so you know of the metro system, the subway system. Yeah, so poor Metro, because please don't take what I say as a criticism of Metro. I am very sympathetic. I'm a huge Metro supporter. They just haven't ever been given any money. It's kind of hard to maintain things if you don't have any money. So the article was written by a person who was riding Metro, and the red line was late. And he tweeted to Metro about the red line being late. No response. Same day, he was on Amtrak. Amtrak also is plagued with some problems. Got on Amtrak. Amtrak had a problem that day. He tweeted about the problem on Amtrak. Amtrak responded. The article in the Washington Post was about how one agency was literally asleep at the wheel and the other one wasn't, because they expected interaction then, in that moment. That's the world we're in now. You guys are doing a great job with your social media, and you all are ready to do that interaction, and that's really great. But keep that in mind. That's the kind of expectation we live with. This is from AASHTO. And you all are on, I forgot now everything. Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, doing blogs, you're doing videos, Pinterest, I think. So you all are on a lot of the social media channels, and that's great. And you also know from the conversation today and are ready to have that kind of interaction. Just know if you're in a district and you're seeing hashtags come across, know what a hashtag is. If you're seeing that kind of interaction, you need to pay attention. It's just not some fleeting thing out there. There is that expectation for interaction. Another dot. Data analytics. Come over here to my friends at Iowa State University. Yes. Data analytics. Look at this number. 20 households today generate more internet traffic than the entire internet in 2008. Wow. Wow. It's a big deal. Look at the size of the data analytics market. This is why we are no longer in control of transportation. It's being driven by a marketplace economy because this can be monetized. It's hard, takes a lot of effort, but that can be monetized. And that's what we're seeing right now, data analytics. We talked just very briefly about how data analytics is not a do-it-yourself deal. I believe that DOTs like Iowa are going to need to be partnering with their university partners on data analytics and understanding what's possible. Need to be buying data analytics services. It's not something that you're going to be able to hire this kind of expertise. You're seeing it. These crazy, smart kids that know how to deal with all that data. It's a whole science into itself. You're only going to get deeper, deeper, and deeper into data analytics. And this will be a skill set that you're going to have to get through research and through purchasing it. Yeah, and so here's the thing that we believe about data right now. There are big expectations about really information, not so much about data. That kind of flies under the surface. It's about the information. It's all about personalized information. Yeah, mining that data for personalized information. Now, you already see that. What happens when you log into Amazon? Pops up right at the bottom of the screen, right? What does it say? You speak now. Hello, Shelley. Recommended for you, right? Recommended for you. So Twitter. So I'm on Twitter, at Shelley Rowe. So I'm on Twitter, and whenever I follow someone on Twitter like the Iowa DOT, then Twitter pops up and it says, since you follow the Iowa DOT, you might also want to follow the Texas DOT and the Alabama DOT and the Arkansas DOT. It's personalizing that data experience. Same with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is particularly brilliant about it because when you connect with someone on LinkedIn, a whole list of people pops up and it says, you might also know so-and-so. But it gives you a list of people who aren't even on LinkedIn. So you might want to connect and invite so-and-so to be on LinkedIn. It's mining information of people not even on LinkedIn to personalize the experience for you. That's what your customers expect. Personalized information. Here's what they say about the car. They want their car to understand their preferences and to do what they want to do in that moment. It's not just a car, it's their car. And their car needs to know what they want to do with it. That's the expectation of how these trends translate into transportation. There is an app for that, right? But here's the amazing thing too, that cell connectivity has enabled. There's a multimodal app for that. Who here works in the transit world? Great, awesome. One, really? We need more of you. So there is a multimodal transit app. The need for multimodal connectivity information is really growing. Because again, connect the dots. Connect to the dots in your mind. Think about the demographics that we're seeing with that changing customer, right? They're less concerned about driving a car. They want to stay connected. They're more than happy to take transit, a very urban phenomenon, I agree. Happy to take transit when it serves their needs and they stay connected, right? So those multimodal apps are really important. The other thing that's interesting about this particular one, Departures New York City was created by New York City DOT through an app contest. They said to a whole bunch of smart people out there, we're going to give you all the data. Here's all of our data. Go figure out what you can do for our travelers. And they came up with this Departures New York City. Put the phone up in the air, it finds out where it is, and it determines what's the closest transit stop next to you and gives you the real-time arrival information. Right? So two things that are interesting about that. It's only possible because of two reasons. They opened the data and put it out there freely, and then they incentivized and encouraged others to develop something that served their customers. I think that's a model that we can leverage. You're already seeing it here by partnering with your universities. But take the data, open it, and encourage people to build things for you, because here's the deal, you can't afford to do it. You can't afford to attract the talent. You can't afford to keep the talent. You can't afford to do it yourself. Why would you when you can just enable it from some of the others? It just takes a little bit of creative thinking. Another article in Washington Post yesterday about Metro again. And it was an article critical of Metro for not releasing all of their data, and that the data quality was really bad because they were protecting some of it. They weren't letting it all out. And there were app developers trying to use the data, creating real-time apps for people like me who could really use it, but the data wasn't being released. So now there's an article again on the front page of the Metro section of the Washington Post about data availability from a transit property. So our customers are becoming increasingly sophisticated in understanding data availability, and what it can enable. And it was in the Washington Post yesterday. So I know you all are using INRIX data. Are you also using HERE data? I can't remember what you told me. No? Mostly INRIX data, right? Okay. So it's very similar. HERE is a competitor to INRIX. I just happen to have HERE's data, and I don't have INRIX's data. But this is amazing. So this is basically crowdsourced probe data that they're pulling from travelers. But look at the scale. Look at the scale. 3 million changes per day to the map databases. That's just the map database to keep it up to date. That's crazy. 9.1 billion transactions per week, 390 million routing instructions per week. This is just another indicator of the scale of data that's out there. We can't keep up with this. We just need to use this and use it to do what you all do best. So let's connect the dots. Think about the customers, think about this data analytics trend, all the Internet of Things, the expectations for interaction. We are living in a mobile interconnected world. Absolutely everything needs to be on a mobile platform, social media for digital dialogue. It's not just for connectivity, it's not one-way sharing, it's digital dialogue. Transportation data can be part of this ecosystem. So think about what you're seeing here. You're seeing an entire ecosystem under development. An ecosystem from getting the data, to cleaning the data, to making it into information, to feeding it into apps, to feeding it into products, to feeding it into services. That's the ecosystem. Transportation data is a piece of that ecosystem. The question for us is, how do we play in it? Do we play in it? What do we get out of it? They're not easy answers. And this is where I think it makes us ask some tough questions. I do think we need to be considering government role. Those are always hard things to think about because we're used to doing things the way we always do them. But because there's so much going on about transportation outside of our kind of transportation, I think we have to really be thoughtful about what's the best use of your time and resources, right? So if you've got the HEREs and the INRIXs of the world, if you've got app developers out there making all kinds of really functional, multimodal apps to serve our customers, then what's your role? And I think there's a big role. This could enable you to focus more on other things that nobody else does but you. Right? Nobody is going to worry about the operation and the management of the transportation system but you. Nobody but a government agency cares about social equity. Nobody cares about whether the information is being equally available to everyone. No one cares if there's official information that you know is right? You guys are using Waze data. That's brilliant. I love it. Waze data isn't clean. right? It's very, very dirty data. But that works for them. Doesn't work for you for official information provider. Right? So I think it makes us go, what can we leave to them that's going to work just fine? And what will they not do? It's the market failure. And government fills a role when there's market failure. So where will they not fill it that we have to? And I think there's answers to that, but we just can be a little bit more thoughtful about it as this world changes. I'm going to pause there. Comments, thoughts. What's running through your head? Nothing's running through your head. It's been an utter failure. Scott, I failed. There has to be, yes.
What do you mean by social equity?
So, for example, when we talk about the dot about vehicles, the vehicle industry, OEMs, they're going to roll out a lot of this technology on high-end vehicles first. Okay? So that means that a lot of the services, a lot of the safety protections, a lot of the things that are enabled by this really fancy schmancy technology will be available to those people who are financially able to have it. Okay, so that's a mismatch in social equity. So if we believe, which is why the government is involved in connected vehicles, because they believe that safety should not only be the purview of the wealthy, it ought to be the purview of everyone. So in order to make sure it's the purview of everyone, they intend to regulate it. So, see the idea? So another example, let's say traveler information. I can get traveler information on my phone because I can afford a phone. Okay, so I have Metro's app, I have several different apps on here, I've got Waze, I've got several different things on here, but I can afford a phone. So that's really awesome for me. But what about the people who can't afford a phone, right? So maybe that's the role of 511. That maybe, because you might have a different kind of a phone. You don't have to buy an app. You don't have to have cell coverage or data plans, but you find another way to get that information to people. So you don't have to buy other things and you can be the social equity provider. Does that make sense? I can see you going, not really.
I have kind of answered that, but I'll go ahead.
Okay. Yes.
I had a comment. So this transition to, let's call it dirty data. So, Waze is a little bit messy and there are lots of people to confirm it. But here and INRIX can also have some dirty data. So this is a big transition for agencies too. How do we know what's clean and what's not? What is the official, if you say there's a crash here, that needs to be really official, not sort of like, well, 10 people said thumbs up and 2 said thumbs down. This is an interesting transition from their data only to relying on others and what's dirty, what's clean, what's efficient.
Yeah, and so that's a good question, and I think that merits a lot of conversation because I will tell you that I am a wildly imprecise person. Okay, so I am much less worried about the precision of it. So it gets to me to the use of it. So let's take Waze. It's a bunch of dirty data, but there's enough of it that you begin to get something that approximates, but it's useful, right? However many millions of people use it. So it's clean enough to be useful. Is it clean enough to be official? I don't know. But I also think sometimes we hold ourselves to an extremely high standard. And one thing that I've had to learn in running my own little business is that done is better than perfect. So sometimes I think that we have the standards so high that we actually shoot ourselves in the foot. But so see, that's me being wildly imprecise.
But I can see putting a message up, right, based on a Waze confirmation, 10 confirmations, and let's say it wasn't right.
Yeah.
That's the transition. It's
right.
like you're actually putting the message up, you use that, and now later it turned out not to be the case.
Right.
So it's that transition.
It's hard, and it's hard. Yes,
well,
yes, sir.
The transition's there, but I look at the technology is changing so rapidly. They're going to know when a vehicle stops or when it's in a ditch.
Yeah.
I would think the density of information is coming much more rapidly than we would know. So I'm looking at that for snow or there's accidents in Ankeny on the I-35 corridor.
Yeah.
I would figure at times they'll be able to pinpoint if there's multiple vehicles that aren't moving, they're off the roadway, there's accidents, they shouldn't be there. So why is that? I think you're gonna get other confirmation.
Yeah.
You're gonna get people confirming, you're gonna get technology confirming, and so
I think it's
on.
one source of information to put a sign on board, to put a word on board.
But we're straddling two worlds.
is.
That's my point. The transition to this,
Yes.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
The old standard of being absolutely precise.
Yeah.
Actually, what we put out there, compared to today where if you have no information, and then you have this dirty information, but a lot of it,
Yeah.
the people who put out no information are not looking to be altogether that responsible. And so I think our thresholds are changing, our
I agree with
standards
that.
have to change.
Because
And then also the message and how we craft it, because we can
Agree
still
with that.
craft it to be accurate. It doesn't have to say there's a crash, we know that there's something.
Reported. Yes, ma'am.
Or we can say messages that indicate the amount of confidence we have in the message. I mean, there's certain ways you say things that make it more clear that we know this is happening, or this has been reported, like you do.
Yeah. I also think, too, that I use the word official data, and I think you need to examine the use of that word. Because when I was thinking about the concept, I was thinking more if you've got a hurricane, or not a hurricane, a tornado, right? Or you have, like in our part of the world, a hurricane that's coming, and you need official information on the evacuation route. And then you have a very specific thing that you need to communicate. That's what I was running through my head with the word official. Not, it looks like we've probably got an accident here, but it's more like, you need to behave this now, evacuate, go now on this route. I think that's a different level of official data that only government can do. You know, only government has that kind of authority. Yes, ma'am.
I'm from traffic and safety, not traffic operations.
Okay.
And so I totally think traffic operations can use the dirty data all the time, and should, because they need to be now. When we're in traffic and safety, and we're going to do a research study that we're going to try to use as backup to continue putting rumble strips down center lines, we want the
clean data.
accurate data, so we don't get picked apart later and said that you lied. And, you know. So we want to be at 77.8% instead of 80%.
Got it.
It makes sense for you.
Will you be using the dirty measurement of volumes, which is coming from the dirty data from crash volumes?
So many issues, right? Right? And so we probably also need to come up with a different term than dirty data, right? Yeah, yeah.
In the standards, you showed the picture of the Vatican back in 2005 and 13. Things change very quickly. We can't even remember what it was like before this. And that's 7 years, 8 years. I know. What's it going to be like in the next 8 years?
That's
and
crazy.
who has that crystal ball to know where we need to be targeted?
And you know, something really important that you just said too is that we can't remember when we didn't have those, but it's also a very different mindset, very subtle, for those people who were only born when those existed. They literally don't even have the paradigm of another way of doing things. We at least remember we remember rotary phones, right? So just say rotary phones, they have little numbers. Yeah.
My kids wonder why I point the clicker at the television. So one other just kind of observation. So do agencies like New York put their data out there? So something that releases them for any QA.
Yeah.
So there's two schools of thought. One, you put the data out there and let the others figure out where the bad stuff is. Or you clean it. And Lord help you if you put out data that aren't at least QA.
Yeah, and I don't know what New York City is doing, but I wouldn't want to create an expectation that the data I released was completely clean, and I wouldn't want to create that expectation.
But what level do agencies?
Yeah, and I don't know. That would be a great thing to look at, and I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
One of the things our social media would be very utilized. So if most of the users
interesting.
are mobile users in the urban areas, we used to install sensors in the congested areas. And at some point, that we want to know information about that region, which is very congested. But now, Index can provide great information in that region. And maybe now time has come to focus towards rural area where there will be no.
That's a really good comment. So I don't know if everybody heard that. He was talking about the social equity question and saying that maybe one of the areas where you would see that social equity disparity is in where you put sensors. So right now with NRICS and HERE data, you get quite a lot of data in urban areas. But you might not get that level of clarity in a more rural area, which is really important in Iowa. So what that reminds me of is, do you remember when we didn't have electricity in rural areas? Right, so that was an area where government stepped in, and there were rural electric cooperatives that actually pieced together that part of the electric grid so that people in rural areas could also have electricity. Now, what I learned later is that that was paid for from all of the electricity provided in urban areas. So you actually use the urban density to subsidize the cost to get that economic benefit in the rural areas. So it's the same kind of thing, but in this case it's data. Yeah, that's an interesting thought. Okay, let's look at some of these other ones. Okay, vehicles. Let's talk about vehicles. Another big dot. So you think about that number, 250 hours per vehicle per year that were sitting in the vehicle. What if you could monetize that? Right? So this is what all the shouting is about. Look at the number, the second number, $507 billion in productivity gains. Right? So imagine the amount of money that somebody can make when they can monetize the time that you're sitting in the car. This is why this industry is moving so fast. There's boatloads of money to be made from self-driving vehicles, from vehicle telematics. This is a money-making machine, and we're not gonna stop it. We just have to figure out how to leverage it. 75% of cars will be connected by 2020. This is cell connectivity because we're already seeing it today. General Motors began installing 4G LTE on all of their models of vehicles this past year. Not just the high-end vehicles, on all of them. And we're going to see that trend continuing because it's a selling feature. People don't want to buy a car that's not connected. They want to buy a car that's smart and that can help them with their apps and all their cool stuff. And if they have to drive, they will. But this is a selling feature. It's a big money maker. So here's what I'm going to do, and this is for the part that's a little bit different for those of you who are in the earlier part. We're going to go into a little bit more depth here. If you don't care about some of this, just hang on, because there's going to be another really important dot that's coming. But so what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about connected vehicles, DSRC connected vehicles, the regulatory action, some autonomous vehicle stuff, and then what all of this means to you, okay? So connected vehicles. So connected vehicles is a term. And the way I use it is just to talk about a vehicle that is in some way or form connected to something outside of itself. Okay? So that could be connected through a cellular technology. We'll talk about dedicated short-range communication. And here's the terminology that you should be aware of. V2V is vehicle-to-vehicle connectivity. V2I is vehicle-to-infrastructure connectivity. V2X is vehicle to anything else. Pedestrians, bicycles, trained, anything else. Okay, so that's the terminology that we'll be talking about. So just a minute about cellular connectivity. This is already here. It's very pervasive. It's growing like gangbusters because there's so much that you can do once the vehicle's connected through cell technology. These are all apps that are enabled. There's Waze. All of those apps there are enabled through cellular connectivity, and that's just a few. There's any number of them. It's here today. It's happening right now. A lot of money to be made in it. It's just a matter of creativity about how to use it. So now let me shift to dedicated short-range communication. Who's heard of DSRC? Okay, so let me give the others of you a little bit of background, and if you don't care about this, again, just hang with me, okay? Because it'll be done soon. All right. So dedicated short-range communication, that's DSRC. It's a form of mobile Wi-Fi. So think about the Wi-Fi router in your house. And imagine that Wi-Fi router has been modified for a mobile environment and is now in your car. It's a receiver. I did that wrong. It's a receiver and it's a transmitter. Okay? So it transmits and receives data. So what DSRC does, and I'll tell you why it's important for safety applications, and we'll come back to 4G LTE. So here's the picture. So what DSRC does is it takes a data set off of the vehicle, takes it off the vehicle, and it communicates it in 360 degrees around the vehicle 10 times a second. Okay? So on the screen in the little bubble, you see some of the data elements that DSRC is spitting out. Okay? 10 times a second. Now the way it works is if your car is also equipped, so your car has the receiver, your car catches the data, there are algorithms on board that process the data and then tell you if you are in danger of an imminent crash. Okay? So this is very quick communications. That's why it's 10 times a second. And the reason it's DSRC is because cellular connectivity is not fast enough. Okay? So that's why all the hoopla about DSRC. However, 5G LTE appears that it would have the same kind of latency, the same kind of speed as DSRC, or really close. So that's, for those of you who are in the technology world, that's something important to pay attention to, okay? Because it might not be DSRC, it might be 5G LTE. But you got to pay for cellular connectivity somehow too. But you got to pay to install DSRC somehow too. So both of them have payment problems. But it's important because of the safety applications. So this is what I just said. It's 10 times a second. Both vehicles have to be equipped. V2V connectivity does not require infrastructure. Okay? V2V does not require infrastructure. There's one exception that I'll tell you about in just a minute, but it does not require DSRC infrastructure. Here's why we care. Because the studies show that we could potentially reduce a very large number of crashes if we have that kind of V2V connectivity. Okay? Very fast, give you a lot of warnings. There's specific crash types that are impacted. Also, run-off-the-road crashes are not one of them. Okay? So if you all have a large data set of run-off-the-road crashes, this doesn't help you. Okay? With one exception. Some of you might be familiar with the safety pilot. I'm actually not going to go into it other than just to say the words. It was tested up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. These are the applications that were tested. And it was successful. Here's the other reason you should care. Because of the potential for safety benefit, NHTSA has announced its intention to consider regulation of this technology into the vehicle fleet. So NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they're the people that require things like airbags, seat belts, headlights, windshield wipers, all the kind of safety equipment on a vehicle are required by NHTSA. NHTSA says that they will release a proposed rule or a proposed regulation this year. Pay attention to that. Now, some in the automotive industry are not going to wait for that. They're actually going to go ahead and move forward with it. GM has said they'll install DSRC on the 2017 Cadillac fleet. If NHTSA puts out a proposed rule, if it goes through the process and becomes a final rule, they typically have a 3 to 5 year phase-in period, so our best guess is you might see this be a requirement around 2020. That's on new vehicles only. Both vehicles have to be equipped. NHTSA's study says it takes about 37 years to completely turn over the vehicle fleet. Now, two things about that. One is that it'll be a geometric curve in terms of value and benefit. Second is that assuming they get this far, I believe that there will be an aftermarket industry that will develop around this. That's trickier than it sounds. There's a lot of problems with it, particularly liability issues with the automotive industry. But I do think that we would see an aftermarket industry. And so I don't think it would be 37 years. And do think about LTE. So just a couple of little things. If you want to talk about this, I'm happy to. A lot of the things that we get asked frequently is about privacy. This system is designed to be private. It does not collect any personally identifiable information. It does not collect VIN numbers, for the most part. It is designed to not be used for law enforcement. The automotive industry said, we won't play, we won't even talk to you if you're going to use this for law enforcement purposes. Who owns that data? I think that's still an open question. US DOT's authority is pretty clear. NHTSA has authority to regulate safety equipment. They have determined that this could be safety equipment. How interesting would that be? FHWA does not have authority to require you to do anything. Driver distraction, that's NHTSA's world. They have guidelines. The spectrum to do this DSRC is currently under test. It's under a lot of pressure because spectrum's so valuable. And we've taken so long to do anything with this. So that's something to watch for the technology people. It is true that whether you are connected through cellular or DSRC, that flow of information from the vehicle to anywhere else is very valuable. There's a lot that you could do if you have that kind of data. Lot of really amazing things that you could do if you have that data. There are also some myths around DSRC. And when I was at DOT, I blame me for not being more clear about this, and I just don't think we've still been very clear. So one myth is that massive infrastructure is required for V2V. It is not. There's one exception I'll just mention, but DSRC, a big massive deployment of DSRC infrastructure is not required for V2V. The other myth, DOTs, man, you're gonna have all these services. It's gonna be great. You're gonna have all this data coming to you. You get to do all this fancy stuff with all the data. It's gonna be great. Maybe. And I'll tell you why. V2Is require this. So V2I, that's like a signal. So think about your traffic signals being equipped with that same Wi-Fi receiver transmitter. Signal phase and timing, signal phase and timing, signal phase and timing, signal phase and timing. The vehicle picks it up, algorithms on board the vehicle, able to tell you if you're about to run a red light. So that's the I part. It could be work zones here, work zones here, work zones here, work zones here. Left lane closed, whatever it is. Yes, you're on a straight line roadway and you've got a sharp curve all of a sudden. Curvature, curvature, curvature. Vehicle has to pick it up, has to have algorithms on board in order to give a warning. So that means you've got to have the OEMs involved to do the algorithms. But they would probably do it. So that's the V2I piece. It's completely optional. You don't have to do it. It's your choice. I think it will be a value proposition to determine how much of it, when, and where. These are some things that I think, again now, so this is digging a little deeper, so some of you won't care about this. These are some things I think you really need to watch. First of all is how that DSRC 5G LTE thing plays out. If I were in your shoes right now and I had a big signal upgrade project, I would probably want to put something in those signal cabinets, but I would probably put both so that you don't lock yourself into one or the other. This is a beta VHS deal. So I would not pick one horse at this point. I don't think it's clear at all which way it's going to go. Security network, and these are why all the little caveats that I've been throwing in there. So here's the thing, and I think it's easier to feel this than to explain it. So my car is connected through DSRC. I've got the little Wi-Fi thing going on, okay? And your car is too. So what kind of car do you want to be? Pick well. Ferrari, okay. All right, so you're going to be a Ferrari, so I'm going to be a Ford, okay? I know, bummer. We won't tell Ford. All right, so I'm in a situation that we're going to communicate through DSRC for imminent crash warnings, okay? Now, I don't have any idea how Ferrari built that crap that's inside your car. And Ferrari didn't have any idea how Ford, my husband used to work in the automotive industry, he calls it fix or repair daily. So you and Ferrari don't know anything about how Ford created my equipment, okay? But now we're exchanging information, right? So I have to trust that your data hadn't been hacked, your car's functioning properly, everything's working just as it's supposed to be, and so when I get that data packet from you, I can trust it and act on it for my customer. Okay. Do you feel how uncomfortable that is? right? Okay? That's why there's a security network that's needed. So the little dotted lines are showing the V2V DSRC communication. The solid lines are a security credentialing system. So there has to be a way for me to know that you are trusted, and for you to know that I am trusted. And that's a trusted network that has to be set up. It is an absolute requirement for the system to work. It is subject to some kind of governance structure. There will be some kind of cell connectivity, very likely cell connectivity, that will have to periodically make sure that my system is functioning correctly and that yours is too. And if something goes wrong with yours, if it's hacked into, if you get into a crash, it ruins your communication module, there has to be a way for the system to know that I can't pay attention to your data anymore. Okay? You get this, right? Okay. So there has to be a way to revoke your information so I no longer hear it. So that's the most complicated thing of this system. Very, very complicated. And it is a requirement in order for this to be deployed. Here's the reason that I bring it up to you. NHTSA believes they can make the automotive industry create such a thing. Go for it. But here's the thing that's important to you. See the traffic signal. So let's pretend that you want to play. And you want to create V to I with your traffic signal system, okay? So you want to do signal phase and timing, signal phase and timing, signal phase and timing. It's the same with the traffic signal. You got to know if my traffic signal's right. You got to know if you can trust my traffic signal. You got to know that nobody's hacked into my traffic signal. Like the Italian Job, remember that movie? Yeah, right. We can't do that. So you have to know. So if you choose to do V to I, you are very likely to be required to be part of the security network. At this point in time, nobody knows what does that mean and how much did it cost. Okay? So that's something to pay attention to. Here's the other thing to pay attention to.
There's another question I have
Yeah.
on trust. You're having a vehicle communicate to another vehicle, so are you looking at the Ferrari as a high-performance vehicle? Or it probably has different braking capabilities? Or let's say it's a truck and it's loaded differently, and so its braking distance is different, or it might have worn pads, or the wheels are worn. So how are they looking at addressing that as to when these vehicles are communicating with each other as to when is it a problem or not?
Yeah, and I don't know, because that gets into the algorithms that are internal to the vehicles. So the studies that have been done are around light vehicles. Okay, heavy vehicles, as you just correctly identified, have a whole different set of issues. If it's just the tractor, it's one thing. If it's the tractor and the trailer combination, it's a different set of issues. Transit vehicles also have different issues. So all of those are different. The studies that have been mostly done to date focus mostly on the light vehicle fleet, and that's what NHTSA is proposing to regulate first. And so those are all the studies that they've done. And how they've accounted for those different situations, yeah. But there's so that leads up to this really easily, or very nicely. The data that's transmitted 10 times a second is referred to as the basic safety message. Okay, and it's a bundle of data about this big, okay? And it has things like, I want to say, heading, lat long, I think it has braking status, I forget some of the data. It's actually not a very big data set. It's the data set that NHTSA requires in order to drive the applications that they foresee requiring, okay? NHTSA only regulates safety. They can't require any more data to be shared than what's necessary for those safety applications. Okay, makes sense? Following me so far? Okay, so it's a data set about that big. Basic safety message, part 1. All right, you can probably do a lot of creative things with that. So some of the surrogates things that you guys are doing, I really hadn't even thought about that. So there's probably a lot of value to what's in that little packet of data. NHTSA would require it to be shared. It would be out there. You got a receiver? Go get it. Okay? However, then there's the basic safety message part 2. It's a bundle about this big. It's got even better stuff in it for you. Some of the road weather information is in there. some of the stuff that you could really use to help optimize the system, it's in there. Right? NHTSA can't require that to be shared. It's there. The automotive industry might choose to distribute it, but guess what? They do not have to give it to you for free. And then there's even a whole lot more data that's out there, but again, nobody is going to compel them to share it with you, and for sure, they're not going to compel them to share it with you for free. So when I say that I worry about this idea that we are telling everybody that there are going to be all these amazing things you can do with all this data, maybe, you need to know what the data packets are. So you really got to dig into the data. It's great that you guys have some of these smart data folks who are working with you. Here's what AASHTO said. This is the AASHTO infrastructure footprint analysis. They said the basic safety messages are inadequate as a general means for collecting road data. The current messaging standards and data dictionaries may not support current or future needs of infrastructure implementers. That's you. Here's what else that they said. There's no obvious incentive for data providers to provide data beyond any mandate. That basically says they'll give you what they're required to give you, and that's it, probably, unless you pay them. So that might not be a bad trade-off, but you need to be aware of it. It's not some big panacea that's going to come landing in your lap. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news. Now, if you want to be a leader in this space, which maybe you do, maybe you don't, there's all of this stuff that you can do. I understand that you guys put in for the first wave of the deployment program. There's another wave that's coming in 2017. Yeah. It's no mystery, by the way, to me when I see who they picked. I mean, I don't know exactly who they're going to pick, but what you notice there is you've got a big city, a medium-sized city, and a rural area. Right? So think about how you want to play. Okay, let me stop there because that's the connected vehicle piece. Questions, thoughts, comments about that before we move on to autonomous vehicles? Was that just way boring, really? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Well, it sort of sounded like from your description that even to just listen to the basic safety message, you need to be part of the trusted network. Is that right? Is it
I don't think so. Now, I don't know for sure. So here's what I'm going to guess, is if you just want to receive, you can put a receiver out there on the side of the road. Okay? If you want to transmit and you want somebody to do something with it, then you're going to have to be, I would think you'd have to be trusted. Yeah. I wouldn't, so put yourself in the role of an automotive manufacturer. Would you go take the data? And if you didn't know where it came from or there wasn't some process, but it also depends on how you're going to use it. If it's just informational, infotainment stuff, maybe so. But if it's safety critical, operational critical, I wouldn't take it if it were me.
That is more on the listening side, is there, will there be folks who, are going to be sniffing data packets from cars like mine, trying to figure out mobility patterns?
Yeah, so on the mobility pattern thing, and so I have pretty much exhausted my technical capabilities here, okay? So, but on the mobility part of it and the tracking, it's done in, you get certificates, okay? So imagine you get just a whole big stack, like it's a big stack of paper certificates, and you use one every so often. And as soon as the next certificate comes up, you can't trace it to the previous one. So you can't use this to trace, you can't do OD, right? So you can't trace a car with it, right? And that security network that I was talking about is designed in such a way that there's big firewalls, different pieces of it, because there's one part that does have to be able to communicate to you that your car's not working right, and you got to take it in. So there is one part that's going to have identifiable information, but it's firewalled off through a lot of different ways from all the information that's on the vehicle.